One of the ways to improve your mix is by having a decent understanding of how the plugins or whatever tools you use works. And I say decent understanding because trust me, there's always room to learn something new about the plugin that you've been using for years. There's always something new to learn. So today we're going to talk about the SSL channel strip, and we're going to talk about the 3 SSL channel strip plugins that Waves has. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm going to show you how they work. I'm going to show you the differences between them, and I'm going to tell you which one I consider my favorite right now. So the first ones we're going to focus on right now is the SSL E channel strip and the SSL G channel strip. Even though these two plugins seem very similar, there's a few differences, especially with the EQ curves. The G channel, for example, has a much wider EQ curve, and the E channel has a much more precise EQ curves. I'm actually going to show you how all of that works. So to the left, we have the filters, and then we have the EQ section, and then to the right, we have the dynamics. First of all, you have the compressor, and then you have an expander or gate when you activate the gates. And then below that, you have the analog on and off button, which adds a bit of noise to simulate that analog feel. And then you have the input gain, polarity inversion, and the output fader, essentially. And if you look to the G channel, it's basically the same thing. But like I mentioned, the difference between these two plugins actually lies in the EQ section. You can use this plugin for literally anything. You can use it for your drum bus, anything. But personally, I prefer to use the SSL channel strip for vocals. But quickly, let me show you the difference between the two EQs. So I'm going to pull up this EQ curve analyzer by Bertom. It's actually a free plugin in case you want to download it. And if you ask me, I think this is a useful plugin to download so that you can always just test out your EQs and see how their default EQ curves are. And even though it's better to mix your ears, I think it's good to know how your EQ plugins react to changes that you make. I think that would actually help you decide on what EQ to use for any scenario. Do you understand? That's the reason why I think this is useful. So I'm going to do some EQ changes, and then we'll see what frequency range we are affecting. And I'll do the same EQ change on the SSL G channel, and then we can see how different the EQ curves are. Let's just do a cut around 3K. So I'm going to pull this down. Let's set this to be a tight Q. So as you can see, this is the EQ curve that we're getting from the SSL E channel strip. Let's do the same thing with the G channel and compare the difference. So let's go very tight Q, E channel off, and G channel on. So as you can see, even though we've done the same setting, the EQ curve is different, so which means this will affect your song much differently than this would. If we come back to the E channel, you can also see that we have the bell option here. This allows us to be able to make a bell curve around the high frequencies, because by default the high frequency and the low frequencies for the E channel strip are both shelf EQs. For example, let's do a 5 dB boost around 8K. Now when we do that, you can see that we have a bit more of a shelf EQ curve going on here, and when we select the bell, it turns that into a bell curve. That's another difference between this and the G channel. For the G channel, you don't have this option. However, what you do have is something called the HMF times 3. It's kind of confusing, but it almost sort of works like the bell. But let me show you how that works. We're going to do the same 5K boost around 8K. Boom. And as you can see, we have a shelf EQ. And if you notice, actually, you have more of the shelf EQ shape with the G channel than the E channel. With the E channel, you can see that the EQ curve starts to taper down as you go higher the frequency range. But the G channel, you can see this is just pure shelf EQ shape. Now let me show you what the HMF times 3 does. Now if you remember before, I said that the high frequency and the low frequency are both shelf EQs, which means this is what you get. But what if you don't want to do a shelf EQ and you want a bell curve around the higher frequencies? Now the high mid frequency and the low mid frequencies both have bell curves. So let's say we want to do a bell curve around 9K, for example. We're going to set our high mid frequency at 3K. Okay, let's do a 5 dB boost or whatnot. So as you can clearly see, now we have a 5 dB boost around 3K. Now we'll come back to the G channel strip and activate the HMF times 3. This is going to take this EQ shape and times it by 3. Remember, we did a 5 dB boost around 3K. So now with this activated, we've moved this from 3K up to 9K. So that's 3 times 3 equals to 9. And you have almost similar settings for the low frequencies. So let's say we want to do a 2 dB boost around 60 Hertz, for example. Let's say we want to add some punched out drums or whatnot. So what we're going to do is go over to the low mid frequencies and set this at 180 Hertz. All right, 180, that's 0.1 Well, as you can see, we can't get down to 180, so I guess we're going to stay at 200. And then 2 dB boost. So technically, this is what we have. And then from here, we're going to go down to the low frequency section of our EQ and select LMF divided by 3. That's the low mid frequencies divided by 3. Now, if you remember, for the high frequency, it was times 3 because we wanted to go higher, right? But with the low frequencies divided by 3 because we want to go lower down the frequency range. Activate that, and now that we've done that, you can see that the EQ curve has shifted from 200 down to exactly around 60 hertz or 50 hertz, as you can see. So with this, you're able to get the bell curve for your low frequencies as well as the high frequencies. Whereas with the E channel, you have the bell button, and all you have to do is just click that bell, and now you have a bell curve. If you have a good understanding of how these two plugins work, you would know how to use them. And there's also a signal flow path that this plugin works with. Let me show that to you real quick, but you can check the manual on the Waves website to really go in depth into it. So by default, the signal flow goes from the dynamics into the filter and then EQ out. And then there's some other features here. Let's talk about that real quick. You have the channel outs and split. Now, when you select the channel out, which is this right here for the E channel, the signal flow changes. It goes from the filter into the EQ into dynamics and then out. When you select split, which is this right here, it brings the filter to the top of the signal chain. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it's the same thing with the G channel. And then you have the dynamic sidechain button. So let's say, for example, you're using the compressor for your drum boss and you don't want the compressor to react to the kick. You can activate this, EQ out the low frequencies, and the compressor is not going to see the low frequencies, essentially. Let's look at the diagram real quick. So this is it. So it pulls the filter to the top, followed by the dynamic out, and then you have the EQ as sidechain. But don't let that confuse you. If you're a beginner or you just heard of this plugin for the first time, I think you should just focus on the default signal flow, which is dynamics into the filter, into the EQ and out. So which means whatever signal you send into these plugins, first of all, going to go through the compressor before it goes into the filter, and then EQ and then out. Do you understand? So just bear that in mind. I mostly just use the EQ whenever I'm using this plugin. Sometimes I use the compressor, but I mostly just use the EQ. It sounds very great for vocals. So that's that for the E channel and the G channel. I'm going to play a vocal that I've mixed using EQs from all 3 SSL channel strips. So you can hear the difference. I also see why it's important that you just use your ears. But before then, let's talk about the EV2 channel strip. The EV2 channel strip is the newest SSL E emulation from Waves. By the way, these plugins are modeled after the SSL E console, you know, that big console, whatever, but don't worry about that. Now with the EV2 channel strip, we have some newer features that are actually quite cool. So first of all, you have this added preamp that is modeled after the SSL E console, and at the top here you have the analog button. Remember to add noise for that analog feel. But there's also something that this does. When you engage the analog button, you are able to use the saturation that you get from this line and mic input. We're going to listen to that in a bit. And then you have the pad up to 20 dB here, and then you also have the polarity inversion button up here as well. After that, we have the compressor and then the expander / gate when you activate that, followed by the filters, and to the right we have the EQ. But we also have EQ type buttons because this EQ is almost like having 2 EQs. We have both the black and the brown EQ type. In my opinion, I think this plugin actually works as if you have both the E channel and the G channel in one. And then again, the default signal flow is still the same with the EV2, which is dynamics to filter to EQ and then out. But you can also check out the manual on the Waves website to get more insight on how the signal flow works. And also, one of the major differences between the EV2 and the SSL-E and SSL-G is the fact that the SSL-E and SSL-G, they are less CPU intensive. Obviously, this is packing more hits, so this will consume more of your CPU power. So as usual, you have the compressor, expander / gate, filters down here, and the filters actually goes up to 350 and what's this, 3K. So that's 350. Yeah, that's 350. Boom. Is that 3K? Yeah, that's 3K. Essentially, this will be great if you're trying to just roll off some low frequencies or some high frequencies that you don't need. And one thing you will notice is the fact that the EV2 channel strips EQ already have sort of like a default EQ curve. As you can see, we already have some dips here and a slight boost here. I mean, they're very insignificant, but there is already a default EQ curve nonetheless. And then when we do a boost, say around the high mid frequencies, you can see what the curve looks like. Let's do a cut around the low mid and see what that's going to give us. Yeah, let's do a cut there. Why not? Let's do a boost around 60. So as you can see, the low frequency and the high frequencies on the EV2 are also shelf EQs. As you can see, when we boost, yeah, we get shelf EQ. But just like the E channel, we have the bell function, and that turns that into a bell curve. And the same thing for the low frequencies turns that into a bell curve. But there's also something that's quite interesting, and I think I'm going to show that to you with the vocals. Okay, let's go to the vocals real quick. So let's go straight to the EV2 first and just listen.
My trips can blow your mind, oh. Again, my baby, get to your mind, oh.
Like I mentioned before, we have the brown and the black EQ. So what we are currently listening to right now is the brown EQ. Let's take a listen.
My trips can blow your mind, oh. Again, my baby, get to your mind, oh.
Now let's listen to the black and you tell me if you hear any difference. So this is the black.
My trips can blow your mind, oh. Again, my baby, get to your mind, oh.
So just like the SSL E channel strip, the black sounds thinner. The EQ curves are a bit more precise. And then the brown sounds like the G channel. The EQ curves are wider. So the vocal sounds thicker when you use the brown EQ and sounds a bit thinner when we use the black EQ type. Depending on the kind of record you're working on, you might prefer to use the brown EQ type or the black EQ type. And it's crazy because it's the same setting, but obviously they sound different. You know what, let's check out the EQ analyzer so we can actually see what the EQ shapes actually look like. So I'm going to just paste this here. So this is the EQ shape for the brown EQ. And when we move to the black, this is the EQ shape. Let me put this side by side. So brown and black. And remember, they are the same setting. Do you understand? But obviously they have different characters and different tone. And that's why you need to use your ears when you're mixing. But like I said in the beginning of the video, knowing how these EQs work will actually help you make the right decisions when you are mixing. Let's say, for example, if I'm mixing a trap song and I want the vocals to sit within the beat, I'll use the black EQ type. But if I'm mixing an Afrobeat record and I want the vocals kind of like sit on top of the music, then I'll use the brown EQ type. Let's listen to the vocals on the SSL E and the G and hear the difference that these different EQs that are kind of the same make to the track. All right, so this is the E channel strip.
Keep your wicked side, so waiting till they see them more. Get wicked doing so, wait they make them feel more.
This is the G channel strip.
Keep your wicked side, so waiting till they see them more. Get wicked doing so, wait they make them feel more.
And now the EV2 channel strip.
Keep your wicked side, so waiting till they see them more. Get wicked doing so, wait they make them feel more.
So as you can hear, the vocals with the EV2 channel strip and the G channel strip sounds kind of similar because the EQ curves are a bit wider. Let's listen to both of them again. So this is the EV2.
Keep your wicked side, so
and then G.
Keep your wicked side, so waiting till they see them more.
But I think I'm doing more boost for the EV2 in terms of the high frequencies. So the vocal sounds a bit brighter. No, actually, it's the same thing for some reason, but this sounds brighter. Again, this just goes to show you how the different EQs can affect your vocals. Knowing how these plugins work, knowing how the EQ shapes are, will actually help you make the right decisions when you're trying to mix a song. Do you understand? Like, these three vocals sound great, but they all have three different sources. So depending on what you're trying to do, depending on what you're trying to achieve, knowing how the plugins work will help you make the right decisions on what source you're trying to bring into the track. But there's also a few more features on the EV2 that we need to touch on real quick. So if you look to the right down here, you see we have mono. Essentially, this collapses your signal into mono when you get to 50% and then starts to reverse the stereo image as you move to the right. This will be great for a drum bus, especially a live drum bus. Instead of giving them a mirror image, you can come here and reverse it, and then they're going to get the actual listener's perspective when they're listening to the record. But I mean, a lot of us would not use that, but you have it right there. And again, if you use this for bass, for example, and you feel like you want to make it a bit mono, yeah, you can come here and squeeze that and make the signal just a bit mono. Actually, let's listen to what it does to the vocals.
Keep your wicked side, so waiting till they see them more. Get wicked doing so, wait they make them feel more.
As you can hear, the vocals actually collapse to the center. I think that actually sounds good if you ask me, but I usually don't do that for vocals. And then you also have this extra wide. This just makes your track or whatever signal you're running through the plugin sound wider. Let's listen. So
keep your wicked side, so waiting till they see them more.
Right?
Get wicked doing so, wait they.
You can hear the vocal sounding wider. Now, if we put this on a drum bus, for example, you would hear the drum sound wide. Actually, let's do that. Let's put it on the drums. Why not? I hate that you just can't search for plugins in Logic. Right. So let's put this for the drums. So if we hit, obviously we've lost all the transients. So as you can see, turning on the extra wide makes the sound wider. I think essentially it takes out the middle channel, but you also have this filter. And when you engage filter, it brings back all of the frequencies, I think below 200 Hertz. Let's listen to that. So this is extra wide. Now with the filter on, you can hear the difference, right? So even though we have the width, we still have everything below 200 Hertz. Do you understand? And there's also one more feature that we need to touch on. Remember they added preamp that the EV2 has? Yes. So we can use this to add some saturation to our signal. However, you need to engage the analog button for this saturation to work. And even though the analog feature is supposed to introduce noise to your signal, the noise floor for this plugin is actually very, very low. As you can see and hear, there's almost no noise. Essentially, you can use this to add some harmonic distortion to your sound. But let's just crank up the saturation with the mic input so you can actually hear what this will do to your sound. Right. And it that's distorting. I'm gonna turn this up, turn the output down so we can just get the sound. This is essentially what gain staging is, by the way. Again, if this is something that you want, if you need some saturation in your sound, you could do this. Let's actually listen to what this saturation would sound like with vocals, right? As you can see, I already done a bit of saturation here. I've, boosted up to 5 dB, but let's just crank it and hear what it sounds like. Right, so that's a very nice feature in case you need some saturation for your sound. So I guess that's everything we need to know about the SSL E Channel Strip plugin, the SSL G Channel Strip plugin, and the SSL EV2 Channel Strip plugins. These are very amazing plugins, as you can clearly hear on the vocals. They sound great. They sound great on anything. And again, getting a decent understanding of how these plugins work should help you make decisions that would improve your mix. I mean, they sound very, very good, as you can hear, and very affordable. Waves have very, very good, amazing, and affordable plugins. Speaking of which, there's a new Waves plugin that I'm currently testing that will drop in on Black Friday. Now, if you go sign up on the Waves website, I'm going to leave a link below that you're going to use to sign up, by the way. You're going to get that plugin for free. It's just as amazing as any other Waves plugin out there. It's a very, very dope plugin. Trust me. And you want to sign up, okay? So I'm going to leave a link below that you can use to sign up. And I'm going to leave a link below that you can use to purchase any Waves plugins at huge, amazing discounts. This is essentially discount season, and there's a lot of amazing discounts on the website right now. And also, when you use those links to buy plugins, you are supporting me as well as getting cheap, amazing plugins to work with. All right, so I'm going to leave a link below in case you want to do that. So make sure you sign up, because when you sign up, you get the free plugin by Black Friday, and also use my link to buy any Waves plugins that you want. All right, so yeah, I guess that's that for this video, and I hope you got something from this. And if you did, as usual, make sure you leave me a like and subscribe if you've not. And if you like to buy my vocal and mastering preset for Logic and FL, I'm going to leave a link below for that as well. And if you like to buy my Pro Tools mixing and mastering template that comes with 3 vocal preset and a mastering preset, I'm going to leave a link below as well for that. All right, and if you like to book my services, I'm going to leave a link below to the engineers page, or you can hit me up on Instagram at Benny Macaulay DB. Okay, so that's it for now. I hope to see you on the next one. Benny Macaulay out. Keep it wicked side, so waiting till they see I'm on. Girl, we get doing so. Wait, they make them feel I'm on. I'm a tosha, I'm a me, I'm on my other. Baby, don't leave my soul.